Barbara, what do you see as some of the challenges when it comes to communicating risks?
Well, as a pediatrician, I think our major challenge is to communicate vaccine safety. That's one of the biggest issues. We do have a lot of international movement in this topic. There are initiatives starting in different parts of the world that are trying to combine the know-how from different stakeholder organizations, pediatricians, parents. There's a big movement to involve the user perspective of the parent, and especially we are focused on engaging the children in this aspect of communication, as they will be taking the decisions in the future in their own children as well as in themselves. So as a pediatrician, we see this as a long-term investment to make a major improvement in the way we communicate risks openly, impartially, and taking the time to actually communicate and listen during that.
Olva, would you discuss some current initiatives aimed at improving communication of risk?
Yes, I was delighted to have an opportunity to update the group on some initiatives that are being undertaken by EU regulators, particularly the Scope Joint Action, which is a Commission-initiated project. And SCOPE stands for Strengthening Collaboration for Operating Pharmacovigilance in Europe. And its real intention is to help national medicines regulators to strengthen the operation of pharmacovigilance in Europe. And a key focus will be enhancing our initiatives around benefit risk communication. So the vision is that we will develop a toolkit in terms of defining best practices and good approaches to communicating uncertainty, to communicating risks in the context of benefit, and with due regard to the therapeutic context for these medicines. The second initiative that I was happy to update on was initiatives from the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, which is more the European view of the challenges, how we're learning from experience, we're exploring the approaches, we're updating our good vigilance practices, and particularly we're participating and linking in with research initiatives. So thinking about innovation in terms of methodologies as opposed to just product-specific innovation. But I think a key central discussion point that came up again and again was the need to foster public understanding of our regulatory decision making, coupled with the need for monitoring of the effectiveness of risk minimisation and following up on our actions to ensure that they're really achieving the intended outcomes in real clinical practice.
Frederic, would you comment on current insights into how risks are perceived?
Yes. Well, what is interesting is that often doctors and the healthcare professionals in general don't take enough advantage of risk perception studies. We know that all risks are not perceived the same. We know, for example, that whether people feel they are in control or not in control, they will not have the same worries. They know that if risks are affecting children, people are going to be more worried. So we need to take these into consideration when we communicate risks. And for example, we know people are much more concerned about DNA technology, anything having to do with genes compared to taking vitamin pills. We know as well that if we are talking about vaccines, for example, giving MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine to a child is not the same as taking a yellow fever jab when we go on holiday. And I think at this point we are not doing a sufficiently sophisticated job at taking these drivers on board.
Well, recently we have on the media and on the population several concerns about the safety of vaccines. So as an expert on communication and risks, how can we tackle the proper risk communication on vaccines?
Well, I think on a patient level, since you're looking at me, I think we have to operate several channels. One thing is we have to communicate openness first and give a good place for the parents to discuss their worries with us openly. So this would be consultation clinics, this can be online question and answer formats, pulling them in and being open to whichever concerns they're voicing, not assuming that we know ahead of time what kind of concern they're going to come in with. I think our recent experiences too is working with digital natives that are half our age, that there's a lot of new modalities of opening communication through digital tools, through social media, mobile applications and other things that will provide a constant channel of communication where a concerned consumer or parent can reach the physician and report in real time what they're worried about. And what I tell the parents very often is, don't have these things running around in your head. Try to share them with us. We do want to hear them. But we have to find the right and appropriate environment in which we have the time and the patience and the know-how to address them. And I fully agree with the regulatory expertise that the knowledge in the general public of what the regulators are doing, that they're actually people who are working full-time on ensuring safety is completely absent in my experience. So most parents are very relieved, whether it's drugs or vaccines, to hear that this whole mechanism of surveillance and that there are people who are experts ready to provide this kind of service.
I have one question for Alma. In the sense, as you have said, also it's important to put the risk into the perspective of the benefits, because sometimes we are talking about risk, but there is also the part of the benefits that we should also communicate in an appropriate way. So I don't know, Alba, if there are ways in which we could improve as regulators to give the appropriate information in both risks and benefits.
I think you raise a very important point, Dolores, because historically, at least post-authorization, as we move through the product life cycle, we now have capacity for continuous benefit risk life cycle monitoring. But how do we translate that into communications that are relevant to reflect the fact that we're reducing uncertainties as medicines are used in clinical practice? I think that's something we have to move forward with, the idea of effects tables, summary tables that highlight the key benefits and risks of a medicine and the uncertainties throughout the product life cycle is something that we can do much more around. But to move from the historic approach where we only updated on safety and not necessarily providing this therapeutic context is a challenge that we're ready to embrace, I think, through the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, working in collaboration with some of the other committees. And as you say, for example, in the area of vaccines, it's critical to explain how we manage safety, that we do it in real time, and then that we reflect the benefits in terms of the impact on disease control. And as we suggest, as experience with the public health initiative increases, then we need to understand that the benefits that are being delivered, so that we can explain the risks and be very transparent around the risks, make the information timely and relevant, be transparent, but put it in the context of the benefits. I think it's an important challenge.
Thank you.
Childhood infectious diseases, Kinderkrankheiten, should no longer be part of expected part of growing up.
It comes back to this good old times argument, and I think we have to embed the vaccine safety communication in the whole concept of safety. And one of the innovation projects that we led actually led to one of the very interesting conclusions. We may actually pick the wrong time point, similar to what Frederic said. When do we communicate vaccine safety? We found that actually we're picking the worst possible moment, which is right after the birth of the first child, when nobody's getting any sleep, when there are lots of changes going around, everybody in the family knows best. And this is the time when we try to communicate this very difficult topic. So one of the ideas that we've developed is that this could probably be part of the entire safety concept that is being communicated during pregnancy, when the mother is trying to get ready for the arrival of the child and the family's ready. So the idea of how do I protect electric outlets in the house, how do I make sure that nobody falls down the stairs, how do I think about safety helmets, putting vaccine safety in the context of general safety messages that we're conveying in public health is very important. I also felt it's very important to let the parents know that we are fully aware that preventative medicine has its own challenges. In other words, the things that I'm trying to prevent won't be there. So this is an inherent challenge in public health communication in general, is whether I say, you've quit smoking today, that doesn't mean I can show you the cancer that you didn't get. This is a common problem, and the parents will understand that we have these challenges and we have to operate around them. So why not make them part of the team?
I think one important thing is also link it to the disease, as you suggested before, Barbara. And we have to remember that a number of these diseases are not so common; they're not so much around. So parents will have to realize that there is a vaccine for a good reason, and that this is not just around because we want to sell the product, and that is very important. So similarly to saying we have to talk about the benefits and the risk of the products, we also have to talk about the wider situation which has to do with the disease and the health and the products.
And one more small aspect that I think is important, I think we have to communicate more clearly what we expect the vaccine to be able to do. So there are certain vaccines where we want to achieve eradication. This is a specific program where we think globally and where we're trying to get rid of something so that ultimately we no longer need to vaccinate. But there are other vaccines where we're just trying to prevent the extreme manifestations of the disease, for example, chickenpox. So I have to tell the parents up front that they may be seeing a few blisters, and it will be a short course of illness, and we won't see, hopefully, the serious neurologic complications that we have seen previously. We won't see the 10-year consequence of measles down the road if we prevent measles early enough. These are things that we've learned over time that we didn't know about the Kinderkrankheit before. And then I also remind the parents that there are lots of additional risks to their children nowadays that we didn't know when we were children. Playing outside on the street is different now than it used to be. The internet addiction, the access to drugs, legal or illegal, and lots of things that we as pediatricians are worried about. So there are few things that we can take out of the picture, and that's my motivation as a pediatrician. My salary won't change if they vaccinate or not. So that also has to be made very clear. I think vaccination is not a business model in pediatrics. So we also have to think about reimbursement models allowing pediatricians to be well qualified, number one, in what they're conveying, but also to have the time to address.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.